What's going on, guys? Threws on the block back again. We're in the garage. I've got an OBS Silverado, and it's time to do some work on this hood, which, as you can see, is rusty. Almost looks like me, actually. Huh. Happy New Year, everybody. It's your boy Three Wheels, Three Wheels on the block. I'm in the garage with a Chevy Silverado. It's got a Cowl hood on it. This is an OBS, that's the old body style, 1988 to 1998, sometimes 99, depending on how you look at it. Today we're going to take care of stripping down this hood. As you can see, it's got a bunch of flash rust on it. We're going to get it primed up. So depending on how much exposed metal we have will dictate which primer we're going to use. Now you can use the epoxy primer in either case, but I've got a can of self-etching primer that I'm probably going to use if we have a lot of exposed metal to restore the etching on the metal, and I'm actually just going to leave the self-etch on there, and then this truck's going to go into storage until we get the rest of everything else in for it to get it ready for paint. Let's go ahead and take a closer look and see what we're working with. So looking at the hood, you can see that definitely all the original primer is, well, yeah. There's some back here in this corner. There's some on the side of the cow right there. But aside from that, looking pretty patinaed. So nothing wrong with patina. However, this truck is going to be painted, so I'm going to go ahead and strip this hood down and get it prepped for storage before we get it painted. And my goal is just to catch this hood before it gets to a point where it has to be replaced. This is actually a brand new hood. You can see how clean it is underneath. So I didn't want the owner to have to replace the hood for a second time, and that is why we're in here today. Tools from my arsenal. Picked this up on Amazon. I like it pretty well. This is just some generic resurfacing tool. Basically, it's a polisher, variable speed, with an attachment that allows you to use a stripping disc or resurfacing disc. Kind of like a red Scotch-Brite on steroids. On my sanders, I've got a 5-inch DA, which is a short throw, a long throw 6-inch DA, a refinishing tool with just a resurfacing disc on there, and I've got some 60, 80, and 100 grit paper. So we're going to start with the big boy and strip as much of the large flat areas down as we can, then switch to the smaller sanders and get the areas in between, wherever that doesn't get to. And then we'll be either using the 260G, which is the DTM primer sealer in gray, or we'll be using the 225, which is the self-etching primer. I'm assuming because of the amount of rust, we'll probably be using the 225. You can use either one of these. Now, this one, you just mix, put in the gun, and it's ready to go. This one has a activation time of 15 minutes after you put your activator in, so a little bit different process. This one you can just top coat just like you normally would. Typically if you don't top coat it immediately, you can scuff it and top coat. Same thing here, so a little bit different. Now if you do use self-etch, I recommend you use a 2K over top of it. With the epoxy, you do not have to. Metal is shiny and clean. I still have to put some wax and grease remover on here and wipe everything down. But it is prepped for a primer, and we are going to use the SMR-225 self-etching primer since we're down to bare metal. Now you can use epoxy primer here too. My choice is to use that because, like I said, this vehicle is going to be in storage for a little bit until we bring it back in for the paint job. Just want to protect this hood to keep it from going any further. As you can see, it took quite a bit of effort and quite a bit of work to get the rust off of there. It was pretty bad off. Still savable, but it was pretty bad off. Definitely don't want to let things get that far. So that's why we have now got it to where it's cleaned up. I'm gonna get the wax and grease remover. I'm gonna go ahead and just put some paper around the windshield and the fenders, even though we're gonna paint this thing and it's getting a new windshield. We're just gonna cover that stuff up so we don't get overspray all over the place. So let's do that, and then we will go ahead and mix up our SMR-225 self-etching primer. I'll go over that mixing process with you on the bench once we get to that point. All right, my apologies. The paint bench looks a mess. I need to get it cleaned up. I've been reorganizing in the garage, and I'm working my way this direction. Anyway, this is the SMR-225 right here, and this is the SMR-226. So this 226, it looks like water is actually the activator for this primer. It's right here. So what you're gonna do is take this, and if you look at your mixing instructions here, you're gonna mix 1 part primer, 1 part catalyst, 1 part primer, 1 part catalyst. Then there's an induction time of 15 minutes. And then after 15 minutes, it's ready to spray. So typically what I'll do is I'll mix this and then I'll go ahead and mask off my vehicle. I've already masked it off, and I'm just gonna go ahead and take care of the wax and grease remover, wipe it down some microfibers while this stuff is doing its thing. Pretty easy for mixing because this is 1-to-1, so nothing too complicated there. Here we go. So here's your 1-to-1 mix ratio. You can see right there, starting at the bottom, so you would go from the first one to the second one, the second 2 to the second 2, 3 to 3, and 4 to 4, etc. Following this column right here. That's it. If you don't have a cup that has the measurements on it, then you can do half of whatever your full amount is. So if you're doing, say, 300 milliliters, which is 350, but say you're doing 300 down here, then you can do 150 of the primer and then 150 milliliters of the activator, and then there's your 1-to-1. I have a video on mixing 1-to-1. I'll put a link at the top of the screen for you guys. So I'll be using this gun you see right here, and I actually will be giving one of these away later this year. I'm doing some more testing on it just to see how versatile it is. I've shot base coat with it, which you saw the red C10 pickup truck. I've sprayed 2K primer sealer with it. I've sprayed sealer with it by itself, and I'm getting ready to spray this primer with it to see how it reacts, and then I'm also going to do some clear with it as well. I think this is a good all-around gun. It's a generic gun from AliExpress, but if you're just getting into painting, this is much better than what you get at Harbor Freight. So this is the gun here. It's the R500. You can see that there or not? Yep, the R500. That's it. Let's get this stuff mixed up, get it in the gun, and let it do its induction, then we'll get it on the truck. I do recommend you wear gloves because cleaning your hands up isn't terrible. I used to not be a glove fan at all. But over the course of time, I've realized that, you know what? Just keep your hands covered, and then you don't have to clean them up, which makes your life a whole lot easier. Now, if you're wondering why I have medicine cups over here on the bench, it's because when you mix small amounts of paint to do speed shapes, these things come in handy. So it's awesome that I've got toddlers because we've got tons of these things that get used and then they get discarded, so they come out here and get used again. Now you're going to want to make sure that you mix this up really, really well. If you don't have a paint shaker, I do have a shaker, but I actually didn't put this on the shaker to show you guys specifically what to look for in your primers before you just dump them in the gun. Take my mixing stick here, I'm gonna go straight to the bottom. And you see that? Yep. That is what you don't want in your cup or in your can. So make sure you mix it up well. I'm gonna go ahead and mix this up, get all those solids mixed into the primer, so that way the primer is, you know, thick enough to do its job. But I just wanted to cover that with you guys so you knew if you don't mix up your paint or primer, you'll have sediment at the bottom, and then those will not get mixed into your paint, and then you'll have rocks at the bottom of your can, basically, because as you use your primer material down, you'll notice your primer's not going to cover as well, go as far, and then you'll run out and realize that all your solids for your primer was at the bottom of your can. I'll show you guys a couple quick mixers that you can use to speed up your mixing process. You can get these at your local hardware store. There's one there, and here's another one here. You can just chuck them in your drill, and that makes the mixing process a lot faster, a lot easier. Alright, that one's done. So if you don't have a paint mixer, you can get one really for, I think these things are about $5 at the store. They're not too expensive, and if you've got an electric drill because you do other stuff around the house, then you've got an automatic paint mixer, basically. Or I say a powered paint mixer, which is great because that makes quick work of getting your paint mixed up for you. Typically what I'll do is I'll take this mixer and I'll just dunk it in a can of lacquer thinner. That gets all the paint off real easy. This one I use primarily for primers. You can see there's some buildup in there, right there. Yep. All right. Now that that's done, I want to mention one thing. If you looked initially in this can, you saw it was this color. Now you see it's more of a camel color. It's a lot darker. So those solids that sunk to the bottom, that's what happens when they separate. You typically will have a difference in color. So if you open up a can of primer or you open up a can of color base or something like that and the color looks off, you probably need to mix it. This thing's been sitting for at least a year on the shelf, maybe longer, not sure. Last time I used it was on the fender for the Pole Hunter Camaro, actually. So there you go. Go ahead and do our 1-to-1 mix ratio. This particular container has like 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1. Doesn't have 1-to-1, so we'll use our scale right here and just go, probably gonna go, let's see, we'll need probably about 300 milliliters for this to get some solid coverage. So actually we'll do 400. I'll go 200 and then up to 400. And we made a mess. That's why most of my cans that I use often are on the mixing rack, because they have nice pour spouts and you don't make a mess like this. Inevitably you can make a mess with anything, but I try to reduce the mess because that's just wasted material that you could use on your project. Here's the 226 activator. And since we were just a little bit above, actually we're pretty close on 200, so we'll go just a little bit above the 400 mark. There we go. Quite a bit of primer there. That should be enough to do 2 coats on the hood easily. Grab your mixing stick. This stuff is not very thick at all, so it's pretty ready to spray. Almost like base coat. Alright, we're going to set the clock for 15 minutes. While this is doing this little induction over here, I'm going to go ahead and finish prepping the truck so we can get ready to spray this hood. As you'll see, I've got everything taped up. I have the paper basically right over where the plastic would flap at. I typically will put paper because you got high pressure in these areas around the corners of the hood. I try to stay away from paper anywhere where you have direct high pressure spray from the gun, 20 psi or higher. Now down here, because I've got the hood elevated, I've just got plastic down there. Now this bumper is going to be replaced, the headlights are going to be replaced, everything's going to be replaced on the truck. It's just good practice to keep yourself up in your tape game to make sure that you're protecting the vehicle the best you can. Now, of course, the top of the cab way up here is not covered, but this clear is baked off and the paint's destroyed and it's going to be stripped down, so that's why I didn't go through the effort of taping up the whole thing. The windshield's getting replaced, but still, just want to keep the overspray down as much as possible. So I'm using some wax and grease remover to clean up the hood. You can also use some other products, Prepsol, you can use Windex, you can use rubbing alcohol. Guys use all sorts of stuff. Wax and grease remover is not cheap, and the reason I use it is because it works, and I will pay extra for a consistent result. That's basically what it boils down to. I'm not saying the other stuff doesn't work. It does. It can. But for me, I don't like to redo things unless I absolutely have to. And this is just a way for me to guarantee that I don't have to come back and fix something with poor prep work. Because my friend Pete says all the time, your prep work is your paint job. So don't go this far and get crappy with your prep and end up ruining your paint job. Now before I put any wax and grease remover on here, I've already blown off the hood with air. I'm going to take a clean microfiber. This is a black one, but it will show up what's going on here, I think. Just wipe across the hood. And you can see the amount of filth that's on the hood. So before you put your wax and grease remover on the rag and wipe down the vehicle, I recommend you just get one clean microfiber cloth and wipe it down first. That will get a lot of the contaminants off the surface. Then you don't have to clean it with your wax and grease remover multiple times. So the first time you're pulling up your loose debris, use your wax and grease remover to get down into the pores of the surface to get whatever else may be stuck and or left. And then you're saving yourself time and you're saving yourself material, which is more money in your pocket. When you're like me, you have 4 little kids, you want that money in your pocket because they're going to take it. That's all there is to it. Or your wife, or your girlfriend, or your project. They all want inside that pocket, get that money. I typically will take a microfiber and go over a hood twice, 2 clean rags. If it's just a fender, one will usually do it, but hoods are pretty big, so try to get as much loose stuff as I can before I put my wax and grease remover on there. And the good part about these microfibers, if you get them from these towels, is that they're sewn on the edge so they do not fray. You can throw them in the washing machine and reuse them multiple times. Which is awesome because then you're putting more money in your... Y'all get the trend here? More money in your pocket. Oh yeah, so be sure to wear gloves because the gloves are going to keep you from getting contaminants in your metal. Now you can use nitride gloves, vinyl gloves, whatever your preference is. I started using vinyl gloves on the vehicle work when I'm doing paint. They don't hold up very good for mechanics work, but they do a really good job of keeping you from contaminating your surface. And they're much cheaper per box, like half the price. So that's why I'm using those gloves. I will say one thing as far as chemical resistance, they are not as resistant to chemicals as the other gloves, so don't think you're going to sit there and clean your gun with lacquer thinner and wear these gloves because your fingers will start poking through. Alright, well here you have it. This is SMR-225, which is the self-etching primer from Speedokote. It's in its dried form. Get you guys in close so you can take a look and see what it really looks like up close. A nice, smooth, even finish. That gun did a good job laying it out. And it dried nice, really nice. You could really top coat this stuff in 30 minutes to an hour, just like it says. Just like the can says. Cool. All right, well, that's going to wrap up this video. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing unmasked. And in another video, I'll get that R500 out and we will spray some clear coat on something. I'll probably do some headlights or something like that. That'll give me a good idea of how it lays out the clear. And it'll be very clear, obviously, when it dries, if it has a nice atomization and we have a nice smooth finish with the spray pattern, or if we end up with a bunch of orange peel. I may do it on a bumper or something like that, but that's the last test I've got to do on the R500 before I can vet that gun as being a legitimate primer, paint, and clear gun. So far it's doing good. I've put it through several tests and I've been pretty impressed with it. This is the result with using a self-etching primer here. If you guys got any questions for me, you can leave them in the comment section below. With that said, my name's Erwin. This Thrills in a Block. We're giving back what time has taken away. We'll see you soon.